Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Depot Dive. I'm Ross McCorkle, and above me here on the screen, as always, is my co-host Joe Clark, and we are going to be diving into a little bit of recapping last week. The Steelers finally getting a win in Foxborough for the first time in forever. Did you say it was the first time in your lifetime? That can't be
Second
right.
time.
Second
First
time.
time since 2008, so second time in my lifetime.
Which is Joe, for those of you that don't know, lives up in the Boston area. He's surrounded by Patriots fans, so a little bit personal for him, I'm sure. I'm sure he kind of heard it from Patriots fans for years about that one. So we're going to recap that game. We're going to dive into previewing the Steelers matchup on Sunday morning, at least morning in the United States, because that game is in Ireland. And then we're going to go over some of the injury reports, some of the roster moves, and all of that. Before we dive in, Joe, how is your week going?
Pretty good. How about yours?
It's good. It looks like the Steelers are slated to travel to Ireland here after practice today. It looks like a lot of the Pittsburgh media folk are already there. We're already seeing a lot of pictures rolling in of Irish folk with terrible towels and what's that famous street over there? I don't know, but decorated and decked out in Steelers stuff. It's basically like their Broadway in Ireland there with all the pubs. So a cool sight over there, and at least to me, at least from my perspective here, it looks like it's going to be a home game for the Steelers. I haven't seen as much Vikings Ireland social media presence as I have the Steelers so far, but that could just be a bias based on my Twitter timeline. But it is seeming like it might be a home game. So we're going to dive into first recapping last week, what happened with the Steelers' 21-14 win over the Patriots. And they needed 5 turnovers to get it done. It's not often that a team has 5 turnovers in a game, and it's certainly not often that only results in 21 points for the offense, but that's what happened here. They needed every last one of them. And Aaron Rodgers and Calvin Austin III set up that go-ahead touchdown at towards the end of the game to get it done. Joe, where do you want to start with this game? Actually, let's start with which of those 5 turnovers to you was kind of the turning point or the big momentum swing?
And I think the biggest had to be the final one to set up the go-ahead and eventual game-winning touchdown. The Patriots are driving down the field. They kind of had a lot of momentum at that point, given that the Steelers had not capitalized off of any of their turnovers except for the first one up until that point. So I think that was kind of the biggest one. It set up the game-winning touchdown, and it gave the Steelers a little bit of a boost there, but to get a stop on their final defensive possession to win the game. So for me, that was probably the biggest. I would also, close second would be the interception before the half. Going into the half of the lead, obviously, is a positive. Of course, the Steelers couldn't bookend that. It's been a kind of a trend this year, not being able to bookend, a strong end of the first half with a strong start to the second half. But I do think it has to be the one that set up the final go-ahead game-winning touchdown, the strip sack by Herbig that Watt fell on. It set up the play that let you win the game. So for me, that would be the biggest momentum swing.
Yeah, Nick Herbig's up to, 7 forced fumbles in his career now, and that is still only at 718 total defensive snaps, which TJ Watt plays roughly in a full season where he's healthy, 900 to 1,000 defensive snaps. And so in his career, Nick Herbig hasn't even played a full TJ Watt's season worth of snaps, yet he has 7 forced fumbles. He's got 9.5 sacks, 13 tackles for loss. 3 fumble recoveries. I mean, his stats are ridiculous on a kind of game-by-game or snap-by-snap basis. And so, I don't know when or if he will ever kind of be a full-time starter for the Steelers. Maybe it's going to be interesting to see what they do with him after this kind of rookie contract's up, with Jack Sawyer now in the picture and Highsmith's under contract a couple more years. TJ Watt was just extended, so it will be interesting to see. I think there's a lot of people that want to see Herbig in a bigger role, but I would say that probably the sequence there at the end of the half, I guess bookending halftime there, where they had the turnover on the goal line twice. I think those were kind of the ones that I had marked as the biggest turning point of the game, but yours are totally fair. Yeah, turnovers really were the story of this game, and without them, the Steelers probably get blown out because the time of possession was kind of lopsided. The Patriots, there was a sequence there where the Patriots had two drives, one of 15 plays, one of 17 plays, and the Steelers, in between those, had a 3-play drive that ended in an interception, a 3-play drive that ended in a punt, a 3-play drive that ended in a punt. And so it was ugly there for a good portion of the game for the Steelers. They did open up the game with 2 touchdown drives, one being kind of a Jaylen Warren drive, another being a 12-play, probably the most impressive drive of the game for the Steelers. And then it just kind of stopped working. I don't really know what to point to there. Joe, to me, the biggest thing was Jaylen Warren had 6 rushes for, I wrote it down here, 6 for 32 yards on that first drive, and then he ended the game with 18 for 47. What happened?
The offensive line just didn't really do their job like they did in the first drive. The first drive, Jaylen Warren had plenty of space to run. Was breaking free into open field, and then everything collapsed. Like, he was getting met behind the line of scrimmage. There's just nothing there. So even though, PFF had it as a good day for the offensive line, they didn't allow any sacks. It wasn't working. And then the pass game wasn't working either. So the Patriots could kind of key on the run. It was just the whole offense just kind of fell apart for a big stretch there in the middle of the game. And that's just something that can't really happen. I mean, especially going forward. They got lucky they had the 5 turnovers because, like you said, it really should have been a blowout. I mean, 2 of those came within the 2-yard line. The Patriots had every opportunity to win this game. They just couldn't hold on to the football. So the offense really has to be more consistent because, like you said, they started off really hot and then things just went away. Like, some of it was maybe they got a little too conservative. I mean, Aaron Rodgers barely threw the football downfield, but just nothing was working whatsoever. So the offense definitely is a little bit of a concern in going against the Vikings this week, and their defense, which will throw the whole book and then some at you. Definitely going to be something to watch to see if they're going to be able to rebound at all this week.
Yeah, Aaron Rodgers, per Next Gen Stats, I believe it is 2.61 is his average time per. I might be butchering that. It's somewhere in that neighborhood, but it's the 4th fastest in the league at the moment. So he's getting rid of the ball in record kind of timing, and especially if you compare it to last year with Russell Wilson and Justin Fields being on the slower end of things. I think Justin Fields was like one of the slowest in his 6 starts with the Steelers. It looks a lot different. The ball's getting out quick, and that means that, those routes are kind of quick developing routes. Either they're, a lot of screens, a lot of stuff at or behind the line of scrimmage. We still haven't seen DK Metcalf used, in my opinion, appropriately. I think DK Metcalf, I don't have it in front of me here, but I linked his average depth of target for each season of his career. And usually those numbers like 11, 12, 13, I think it was even close to 14 at times for a whole season. And through the first 3 games with the Steelers, I think he's at like half of that at like 6 average depth of target. So they're just not really finding ways to use DK Metcalf appropriately, and I think that we can kind of point to the offensive line as the reason why. Yes, Aaron Rodgers wasn't sacked, but he had pressure in his face pretty much right away a lot of times, and he was sacked once. It was just negated by a penalty, so he took some hits still, and so by no means was it a good game for the offensive line. I actually think Troy Fautanu was kind of one of the issues in this game, which is unfortunate to see, but you give him more grace than a guy like Broderick Jones, who is in his 3rd season. However many starts he has under his belt, Fautanu only has, now 4, including that kind of half game he had last year. So where do we want to go from here? Recapping Derrick Harmon's debut. That's one we need to talk about for sure. I think it was everything you could have hoped for in a debut. I don't think it was quite to the level of a Zach Frazier debut last year where he had, 5 or 6 pancake blocks, like one of the best debuts I've ever seen for a rookie. Wasn't quite to that level, but he did get a sack, which was the first Steelers rookie debut to have a sack in their debut since TJ Watt in 2017. So it's been a while since that's happened. And Joe, what did you like the most in Derrick Harmon's debut?
Yeah, I thought he did a good job on the backfield. He was chasing after the quarterback. He was just stout. He was solid. He was kind of, I mean, that wasn't a good day for the defense, so he wasn't, necessarily the quote unquote missing piece. But I thought he played pretty well. And as he continues to ramp up, I mean, the first time he really practiced since the injury was the week of the game. So he was obviously on a limited snap count. But as he ramps up and it can, play more of a full game, I think the Steelers have a, really solid player on their hands. So I was very impressed with that. Good to see him get after the quarterback early, knock that one off. And I think, we can see a lot more of that going forward this season.
Yeah, I did a full film room breakdown of him on the site. If you guys haven't checked that out, I highly recommend doing so. It's nice to see the clips. You can talk about it all we want, but just seeing the clips and actually seeing the play does illustrate what kind of game he had. And I think, the play strength was there. I think, the technique is a little rough around the edges in certain places. Like, I think he plays with high pad level sometimes. I think, his gap integrity could use some work. There were some times where he was kind of working himself out of his gap and kind of leaving them vulnerable. I don't think that it was really taken advantage of by the Patriots too often, except for Harmon's very first play. It seemed like he kind of went out of his gap a little bit, and they did maybe take advantage of it a little bit there. Actually, that might have been the Cole Holcomb forced fumble. So it ended up backfiring on the Patriots, but that was a nice gain if the fumble hadn't happened. So gap integrity, playing with good pad level, those are the things to work on, but he was hustling. There was a play where he turned around and made a tackle 10 yards down the field. That's something you'd love to see from a big defensive lineman, especially in their first game. You can teach that stuff, I guess, but really players either have that kind of hustle or they don't. And it looks like Harmon does have that hustle. There was one play where he got double teamed and he caught one of the guy's punches and chopped the other punch down. So he's already showing signs of being a good hand fighter. So a lot to like from Harmon. His sack wasn't overly impressive, to be honest. He kind of was just a motor play, if you will, where he just kind of worked his way across a couple of blocks and more or less cleaned up what was Cam Hayward's pressure. But you still have to make the plays that are there. We saw Y.A. Black miss a couple sacks here and there. So overall, very solid for Derrick Harmon. Cam Hayward finally having a breakout game. He had a deflection, which led to an interception for Brandon Echols in the end zone. He had a forced fumble, and he had a sack of his own, many other pressures. I mean, he was just wrecking the game left and right. You probably don't win this game if it's not for Cam Hayward. Anything else from this game? I think the inside linebacker stuff, there was some interesting stuff there, Joe.
Yeah, there's some miscommunication for sure on the Hunter Henry touchdown. I think it was his second one. Both Patrick Queen and Peyton Wilson just kind of looked at each other as there's nobody around Hunter Henry as he caught a wide open touchdown pass. Peyton Wilson, I mean, he did recover the Cam Hayward forced fumble, but he just really does not look very good right now. I don't think as a rundown defender, he's somebody that can continue to keep putting out there, and that's why Cole Holcomb played more last week. Terrell Austin said today that Cole Holcomb has kind of earned a role. They'll see how things shake out, but he's probably going to keep playing more. Maybe we're kind of seeing that it wasn't just medical why Peyton Wilson fell into the third round. I mean, last year, some of his run fits, he struggled to get off blocks a little bit in the run game, but he was really good against the pass. And, you kind of expected this year that some of that stuff would work itself out, the whole offseason to work on it. But he's just been a mess so far this season. I actually thought Patrick Queen did a pretty solid job against the run. PFF wasn't very kind to him. Him and Wilson and Queen, I think, were the two lowest graded defenders on the day. But I do think he was pretty solid against the run. But, the communication issues there. Hunter Henry, for the second time in a row against the Patriots, because he did it on that Thursday night game a few years ago, had a really big day. And, allowing tight ends to continually get open and have a big day. This is now the second game in a row because Elijah Arroyo had a couple of nice catch, or at least one nice catch and run. AJ Barner had a touchdown. So the communication between the linebackers has been a problem. That does fall on Queen as the kind of the green dot guy. Although it did seem as if to an extent the communication in the secondary was better, but those third and longs, I feel like a lot of that just came down to a lack of execution. So I'm not really going to put too much of that on the communication. I just think people let their guys run open. But I thought Queen was better than maybe he got credit for, but Wilson, yeah, it's been a rough start to the season for him. I still have hope he can get better. I mean, sophomore slump, we hear about it all the time, but It's definitely been a really rough 3 games for him, and I think maybe a little less snaps might benefit him, try to get some of his confidence back.
Yeah, from listening to Terrell Austin and some of the other coaches throughout the week, it sounds like Cole Holcomb has earned himself more snaps and probably will, I would imagine, get the start most of the weeks, although it just kind of, they have also said it depends on the matchup. If this, if there's a team that's going to try and spread them out and pass, maybe you do see Peyton Wilson more, but I would expect probably it was roughly 50-50 split in the snaps this past week between Holcomb and Wilson. Probably expect roughly that going forward, maybe slightly more in favor of Holcomb, at least for the time being. I don't want to say that the experiment has failed with Peyton Wilson being in every down linebacker, but it certainly has taken a step back, I think, from where people's expectations were coming into the year. And a similar story up front with Daniel Ekuale and Keanu Benton. I think Daniel Ekuale actually looked pretty good and probably earned himself more snaps as Keanu Benton continues to struggle a little bit. I don't think he struggled as much necessarily as he had maybe in week 2 and maybe even week 1 as he did against the Patriots here. But still, I think Ekuale is probably due for some more snaps there. Joe, if just summing this whole defensive performance up, given... Let me see how many yards did they actually allow. It was 369 total yards, only 14 points, given the 17-play drive, the 15-play drive, unable to get off the field on 3rd and 4th down. Where do you land on this defensive performance as a whole? If you had to give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down, kind of a binary, just what do you make of this defensive performance?
I'm gonna hedge and go the like thumbs middle, like leaning down. So obviously 5 turnovers is great. I think, for the future it provides you confidence. You can get forced turnovers, but good defenses don't allow teams to, convert 3rd and 13s out of the 4th and 2 that Cole Holcomb just kind of slipped in the backfield. Multiple, there's a 3rd and 6. Like, good defenses get off the field on 3rd and long. Good defenses don't allow guys to get open in the middle of the field on 3rd and long and provide an easy target for the quarterback. So that was troublesome. Like, yeah, they got the turnovers, and again, good sign going forward. This team can force turnovers. We've known for the longest time that this defense, harps on the turnover culture, and they can force turnovers. It's getting off the field and not allowing chunk yards, and they didn't do that on Sunday. So I would say it's more negative than positive because, again, if they don't have those 5 turnovers, this is a game they lose by 2, maybe 3 touchdowns. Yeah, they did have those 5 turnovers. It was all well and good. But, the Patriots offense was more or less moving at will until they turned the ball over. It was very rare that the Patriots offense wasn't getting what they wanted, whether it was, finding Hunter Henry that the run game wasn't great. The run defense was a lot better for the Steelers, but the passing defense is a mess. And you're down to Sean Elliott, you're down Joey Porter Jr., fine, whatever, but it just wasn't very pretty. So I would say it was much more of a negative than a positive, given the fact that, you can play great on the first 2 downs, but you're not getting off the field on 3rd downs, and then you get gassed, and it's just a ripple effect. So definitely more negative, and that's just the sort of stuff that can't happen going forward, and especially not if this team has real plans on making the playoffs and contending.
Yeah, and the Patriots going for it on 4th and 1 from their own 15, I think, sums up the game pretty well. That's a disrespectful, in my opinion, there from Vrabel to make that call, but it paid off. They got a 10-yard run and converted, and that's just a terrible, terrible situation for the defense. Very demoralizing. I would agree. It didn't make me feel. It probably made me feel a little worse about the defense, to be honest with you, and worse about the team overall that it was only 21-14 despite the 5 turnovers. So I think that sums up this game pretty well. Kind of a lukewarm attitude overall, and going into a fairly tough matchup this week against the Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings, who just blew out the Cincinnati Bengals. What was the score in that game? 48-10. And that was largely in part to 2 defensive touchdowns for the Vikings. Isaiah Rodgers having a interception return and a scoop and score as well. That is kind of a bizarre sequence of events, but it is worrisome that the Vikings are able to create so much havoc on defense against opposing offenses, and the Steelers' offense looked as bad as it did this past week. They haven't been able to really get in any kind of rhythm, and that's something that Brian Flores is going to be able to take advantage of. Joe, where do you want to start? let's look at some individual matchups here first.
Yeah, so I think one thing to note is Jordan Addison's coming back. He had a 3-game suspension for violation of the personal conduct policy. So if he's back, who's going to match up against him? One thing to note too is like Kevin O'Connell wasn't super committal about Addison playing his full suite of snaps, so he might only be used. He'll still play a lot, but he might not be used as much as he would, but he's still going to make an impact. And given the way the Steelers defensive backs have played, he's a guy that can certainly make an impact, especially with Justin Jefferson across from him. So you would assume that it's going to be, either Darius Slay or Joey Porter Jr. if he returns from injury, which, as we'll get to later, seems pretty likely against him. I mean, Brandon Echols could rotate in after his good week last week, but I assume it would probably be Slay or Porter. And then Justin Jefferson, I mean, he's one of the best receivers in football. He's a natural talent. You would assume they have Jalen Ramsey against him. So I think as far as the passing game goes, that's one to watch. I mean, honestly, even though those are two of the best receivers in football with Carson Wentz back there, I'm not super concerned about the Vikings beating the Steelers through the air, which I say last week when the Patriots with like Kayshon Boutte and Mario Douglas and Hunter Henry beat them through the air. So I'm probably going to eat my words next week, but it's kind of the run game. Jordan Mason had a really good week last week. And the Vikings are down Donovan Jackson, who's their starting left guard. He played really well in week 1. He got hurt in week 2, determined he needed surgery, but playing through it wasn't going to impact him in week 3. So he played week 3. He was a little worse week 2 and 3, obviously, because he was playing, I think it was a wrist injury that needed surgery. So obviously that's going to impact you as an offensive lineman. But they're getting Ryan Kelly back at center. So I wonder if they're going to kick Michael Juergens, who's been filling in for him at center and actually playing really well, over to left guard. And then you have Christian Darrisaw. He came back last week at left tackle. So I think Darrisaw versus Herbig's an interesting matchup. Darrisaw is one of the best tackles in football. But Herbig's got to, speed around the edge. And then if you have Cam Hayward going up against a backup, even if it is Juergens, he's still a backup guard. Given the way Hayward played last week, could we see, a really nice week out of him? But this Vikings offensive line is good. I mean, Kelly, obviously longtime Colt. Will Freeze is also with the Colts. He's been, a pretty solid player, pretty solid guard. And Brian O'Neill, Pitt guy, has been in the league for a long time. So this is a very good offensive line. And given last week, run defense was better last week, but with the way Jordan Mason also ran last week, is the run defense due for a regression? Are we going to, see more of the week 1, week 2 run defense? That scares me a little bit more than the passing game this week, but I do think Addison and Jefferson versus their individual matchups is going to be important because obviously, if they're getting open every play, then Carson Wentz, he's Carson Wentz, but he's still going to be able to throw over them. And he had a nice week last week. He's very efficient against the Bengals. So I do think that it could be an interesting chess match between what the Steelers defense does against the Vikings offense. And on the other side, as we'll talk about, it's the ultimate chess match. But I do think it'll come down really to if the Steelers defense can kind of right the ship. And I'm not confident in that happening, to be completely honest.
Yeah, that's fair. I think Carson Wentz hasn't had a game over 200 yards passing since October 9th of 2022. His last 4 starts, let's see. He had 99 yards in one of those, 143 in one, 163 in one, 98 in one. And then last week he had 173. Now he is playing with the Vikings and kind of a pretty good offensive system overall. Kevin O'Connell, one of the brightest offensive minds in the league, really. And he has weapons like, TJ Hawkinson. We didn't really even mention him. The Steelers have taken lumps to the tight ends, and that's something that could be a big factor in this game as well. But I think they're just going to expect Wentz to be a point guard, and I think Jordan Mason kind of lean on the run game a little bit. The Steelers trended in the right direction last week against the run. Hopefully they can kind of right that ship a little bit. And Joey Porter Jr. and Deshaun Elliott, if they're returning, what kind of impact is that going to have? Is the defense finally going to be able to do some of the things that they intended to do coming into the year, where Jalen Ramsey is used as more of a chess piece and not forced to play, deep safety quite as much, and you can move him around and confuse offenses. They've kind of been vanilla over the first 3 weeks, and maybe this will be their opportunity to actually make things complex for once. Ben Roethlisberger had some words for the Steelers coaching staff. He kind of waffled a little bit, but more or less said that the Steelers are, I guess he wondered if the Steelers would get outcoached in this game, and then kind of went through, okay, Kevin O'Connell's one of the best. Brian Flores, Steelers never should have let him go. He didn't outright say it, but pretty much saying, okay, the Vikings have a significant coaching edge in this one, and that will be one of the big things to watch. I did want to highlight Aaron Rodgers' stat line last year with the Jets against Brian Flores and the Vikings defense, because I think this is interesting. Albeit this is with the Jets. The Jets were dysfunctional. The Jets only had 5 wins last year. The Steelers are not the Jets. And Arthur Smith's offense certainly is a different situation than what he was playing with in New York. But Rodgers' stat line last year, 29 completions, 54 attempts, 244 yards, 2 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, 3 sacks taken. Those 3 sacks really could have been much worse because he was hit 11 times, 11 quarterback hits taken. So he was constantly under pressure. They fell behind early in that game, and basically the Vikings pinned their ears back and made life extremely difficult on Rodgers in that game. I believe the Jets only had like 50-something rushing yards in that entire game, so they weren't able to get the run game going, which I'm sure that sounds familiar to some of you Steelers fans listening to this. So I guess my biggest takeaway from that is this is really going to have to be a game where the defense steps up and keeps this score low. Because if the Steelers fall behind and they're forced to start passing, and I don't mean just doing these screen passes, I mean if they're forced to start taking shots down the field, this could get ugly in a hurry. Joe, that's my key to the game. Do you have anything to add there?
Yeah, I fully agree. I remember watching that game last year, and Rodgers was literally under pressure immediately, and a lot of those interceptions came because he was, trying to get out of the pocket, and this was still, early in the season, early in his Achilles recovery, and just kind of hucking it downfield. It was, I mean, the Jets' offensive line and run game did him no favors. They were completely one-dimensional, and Brian Flores took advantage of that. And if the Steelers have to become one-dimensional on Sunday, Brian Flores is going to take advantage of that, and he's going to throw everything at Aaron Rodgers, and it's going to get ugly. So I would agree with you that is kind of the key, just because of how that game last season went. I mean, interesting caveat, that was also an overseas game. That was in London, 9:30 start. So, not we're in Ireland, not London, but a little bit similar given the same start time, and the fact that they're playing the Vikings and Brian Flores. So I wouldn't be surprised if Flores tried to run the same game plan given what the Steelers have done so far. I mean, he might be down Andrew Van Ginkel. I think he at least, I want to say he maybe had a sack in that game last year. I could be wrong. He had
an interception, I think.
He had an interception. Yes, that's what it was. I knew he made a big play in that game. Yeah, so I think Josh Metellus made a big play or two as well. So definitely can't get too one-dimensional and rely too heavily on the passing game, because that's where the Vikings defense thrives and has thrived last year. I mean, they won 14 games with Sam Darnold at quarterback last year, when many expected that Sam Darnold would get benched before the season for J.J. McCarthy, and their defense really, really kind of carried them throughout most of the season. So they're going to get after it if they can. So the Steelers have to, keep things close, be able to at least run the football a little bit, and not have to chuck the football deep down the field.
Yeah, Rodgers is supposed to be one of the better quarterbacks under pressure, but maybe some of that mobility leaving him as he gets older, and just not trusting his offensive line at all right now. It seems like last week's interception against the Patriots is a good kind of play to point to in terms of his performance under pressure. He got hit immediately after that throw. It was a terrible throw. He'd never saw Robert Spillane. He just kind of panicked and never saw it, got returned, put the Steelers in pretty bad position. Thankfully, the defense bailed them out. But, I kind of fear that it's going to be that kind of game here in Minnesota. We haven't been doing score predictions, but let's go ahead and I haven't really put too much thought into mine yet. But what is yours, Joe?
I'm going to go 28-17 Minnesota.
Yeah, I think I have to go with Minnesota winning this one as well. I just see too many win conditions for them. And really, there's only one path, and I think I've already outlined that. One path to the Steelers staying in this game, and I'm not so confident it's going to happen. I think 24-14, something like that, in favor of the Vikings. I'm not too bullish on this one overall. We're going to move into talking about some of the injuries that we've already talked about it a little bit, but just summing that up. Joey Porter Jr. and Deshaun Elliott were limited on Wednesday, their first practices since exiting week 1 with injuries. Deshaun Elliott, it sounds very optimistic that he will play based on some of the insider reporting around the team. They kind of said he's looked ready to play for the last couple weeks. Maybe it was just a precaution not to play him. But anyway, it sounds promising that he will play. Joey Porter Jr., I was maybe a little less optimistic about, but seems like maybe he could play too. Mike Tomlin left the door open for both. He did rule out Alex Highsmith, so they'll be without one of their 4 good edge rushers there, but I think they've proven that that's not a huge deal for them. Was I missing any on the Steelers side? There were some veteran rest days and other things like that. In terms of the Vikings, they had a handful. Do you have that list handy? If not, I can.
I do. They did not practice yesterday. Donovan Jackson, he's not going to play. JJ McCarthy, he's not going to play. Andrew Van Ginkel is an interesting one. He had a neck thing in training camp. They said it's kind of an extension of that, and they're not really sure what his workload's going to be this week. Javon Hargrave with a chest. Jonathan Allen had a rest day, and then backup tight end Ben Yurosek also didn't practice. Josh Metellus is limited, but he'll probably play. And then Justin School is a backup tackle. He filled in when Darisaw went down. Was full with a concussion, and Ryan Kelly was back full with a concussion. Both those guys. Well, School might not play if they don't start him. Ryan Kelly will probably play and start at center. Hargrave, certainly notable, former Steeler, kind of a guy that can wreck things in the middle, along with Allen, 2 guys they both brought in this offseason to bolster an already impressive defense. But Van Ginkel, I mean, since getting to Minnesota, he's been kind of one of the better outside linebackers in the league. I mean, I think it's obviously a very good scheme fit. But then even if he doesn't play, then the Vikings can just kind of turn it and give Dallas Turner more reps. They've kind of, they have, like the Steelers, they have 3 very good outside linebackers with Jonathan Grenard, Andrew Van Ginkel, and Dallas Turner. Their first-round pick last year out of Alabama. So Dallas Turner could see an uptick in a role if Van Ginkel doesn't play. It's still a loss, certainly a big loss, but they have a capable replacement, kind of as not as good as Nick Herbig. Nick Herbig's the best third outside linebacker of the league, but shades of the Steelers one of Alex Highsmith. You have Nick Herbig, you're not completely screwed out of the position. So even if Van Ginkel doesn't go, they're not completely screwed. But that is the most notable guy that did not practice that I would say probably has a chance to play, followed by Hargrave.
I did want to mention as well, the Steelers still only have 52 guys on the roster at the moment, ever since they sent Max Sharping to IR, was that last Saturday. So a full week without bringing in that extra guy, kind of interesting to me. Maybe it's just because it's a weird abbreviated week and then they have the long travel. I mean, this isn't a week where you'd think they would sign somebody on Saturday, so unless something breaks in the next couple of hours, they might roll into this game once again with only 52 on the roster. However, they did bring in Nate Herbig, who had previously retired in July, and of course the brother of Nick Herbig, of course the same Nate Herbig that was on the Steelers roster for a couple seasons there, ended with a rotator cuff tear in 2020. That was just last year, 2024.
Yep.
So an interesting name that might, I mean, when he was playing, I don't know what kind of shape he's in. I don't know if the injury stuff played into his retirement. I have no idea what the situation is there, but if they deem him healthy and he's, ready to go, that's a very good depth addition in my mind. He can play center, he can play guard. He's a big guy. He's a guy who can create push in the run game. The kind of guy that really they are lacking in terms of depth, especially. So a very interesting name in my mind, and hopefully he will get signed in the coming days. The Steelers also worked out, 5 other offensive linemen last Friday. None of them were signed, so I don't know if they're still deciding or trying to hold out hope for Nate Herbig. I don't know, but maybe a move coming there soon. I think that is all for now. We're going to move into our listener question. If you want to have a question answered, 412-254-3145. You can call and leave a voicemail, or you can text the line. Just tell us your name and where you're from, and we will read off your question on a future episode. This one is from Brett in San Angelo.
Hello, Depot Dive. This is Brett from San Angelo, and my question for you is, have you all noticed the same trend that seemingly the Steelers have to have all components healthy and playing in order for things to work, yet other teams can have multiple injuries that the Steelers should be able to take advantage of, yet they don't ever seem to be able to take advantage of it? So this last week, for example, having a couple of corners out, and yet your passing game looks absolutely abysmal as no one seems to be able to get open against the backup corners. And that playoff game against Cleveland, basically their whole offensive line was out, and yet they ran the ball at will. I'm sure that there's some recall bias in that, but do you guys notice the same kind of pattern that the Steelers don't seem to be able to take advantage of when other teams have lots of injuries, and Steelers frustratingly seem to have everybody healthy for things to work? Love to hear your thoughts. Thanks.
All right. Yeah, I think this is a fair critique overall. I think especially on defense is where we've seen it over the last few years, really. You talk about 2023 where they had 7 or 8 different inside linebackers, 7 or 8 different safeties, and they really had to dumb down the defense to make it work, and it still wasn't really working. I think we've seen that at the beginning of this year a little bit. Mike Tomlin has repeatedly pointed to limited schematics in terms of, well, for one, they had all 4 starting people in the secondary were new to the team this year, with Deshaun Elliott and Joey Porter Jr. out injured. And so, yeah, Tomlin was pointing to, well, we couldn't really run all the things we want to run. To me, that is kind of, it's a head scratcher. I guess maybe at a high level, if the Steelers are healthy and everything's clicking, then their defensive scheme maybe does make sense. Maybe it is this genius level defense if everything goes well. But how often has that happened for them over the last few years, and how can you really rely on that happening? So I get the frustration there, Brett, 100%. It does seem like other teams are able to kind of, make the best of bad situations better than the Steelers are, especially on defense. Joe, anything to add?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you look at the Seahawks week 2, they're down Devin Witherspoon, and it was Josh Jobs really stepped up for them. They've had guys, whenever there's a guy out against them, it seems as if it doesn't really make as much as an impact as you think it would or should. So yeah, I agree. It's a fair gripe.
I think the Steelers, back when they were so good on defense, you had situations where rookies weren't playing right away. They developed for two or 3 years before playing, and it was just a different era of the NFL. The salary cap wasn't, accelerating things quite as fast as they are now. As the salary cap explodes and contracts go up, teams are less, inclined to let these players sit during their rookie contracts, and they make them play right away. And if the Steelers' defense is so complex, or the communication stuff, which keeps popping up year after year, if that's so complex, maybe it doesn't make sense for the team to continue in that kind of scheme where it's just only works if you have crazy continuity. The Steelers don't have that type of continuity, especially in their secondary. So, I think it's absolutely a fair gripe there, Brett, and a good question. Don't really have an answer as to why, other than just some of those little pieces of evidence there. But that is all for today's episode. Again, if you want to have your question answered, 412-254-3145. If I spoke too fast, that is in the show notes as well. Steelers will be playing bright and early, 9:30, I think it is, Eastern time on Sunday. It's going to be interesting that we're going to be done with our day's work at 1 or 2 or 3, something like that. A little bit different for us on a Sunday, but a welcome change of pace. Get to sit back and watch some football. I hope you guys all enjoy the Ireland festivities. Who's calling the game? Is it
Joe Davis and Greg Olson?
They probably could have done better than that for the Ireland game, but I guess I don't have anything against them. But anyhow, enjoy the game, enjoy Ireland. And hopefully the Steelers walk out of this with a win. I am Ross, that is Joe, and we will catch you guys next time.